All right, happy Thursday. Welcome to our webinar night. For those of you who have never met me or been on one of these webinars, my name is Jessica Lanier. I am an integrative registered nurse and health coach, and my passion is all things integrative health, holistic health, nutrition. I've studied a wide range of different approaches to help people get to the root of what's going on, and tonight's topic is one of my personal favorites. It's something that I am personally passionate about, and I have been super passionate about because it was the area that I struggled with the most in my own health journey. My digestive health was horrible all through college, and I went to so many different specialists and was put on several different medications for, I had acid and severe food reflux at 20 and 21, and I ate a super healthy diet. No one could really tell me why. They just gave me some medication. And so this has become a system of the body that I've learned to become fascinated with. And I'm really excited to kind of share some of the things I've learned, and specifically through research, how I've learned and the studies that are out there of how it connects with multiple sclerosis. And it's really promising, you guys. It's actually incredibly encouraging to see the new research that's coming out. And I've had the opportunity to talk with Lindsay a little bit about that as well. And I'm just really excited to bring this to you tonight. So if you've not been on a webinar tonight, first of all, this is not my usual backdrop. Since everyone's quarantined at home, I'm sure you understand. I have a 2 and a 4-year-old, and they are currently locked outside with my husband, and they've got like tractor work going on with the garden. So you are in the office of my bedroom, and that's why you get the lovely blinds and curtains behind me. From my home to yours, literally.
Oh, Mickey, huh?
Okay, so let's go ahead and dive in. I did want to make sure that you all know about the chat feature. So there is a little box on your screen, depending on if you're on a phone or tablet or computer, where you can actually type in questions or type in responses or type in comments. I will go ahead and write hello to you guys so you can see it pop up, and feel free to use that. I will, by the end, I'll make sure and visit the chat box and make sure that I've answered any questions that you guys have, and there will be an opportunity at the end for you to unmute yourself as well. Okay, let's go ahead and get started. Let me put this in presentation mode really quick so it's easier for you guys to see. And we should be, uh-oh. I'm not sure what happened here. Hold on one second. Let me try that again. Okay, can you guys see my screen? Okay, perfect. All right, so we're talking about gut health, digestive health this evening, and specifically how it relates to MS. So here's kind of a little bit of a breakdown of what we're going to be talking about. First, I'm going to give you a basic as I can keep it, anatomy and physiology lesson on the digestive system. And I think this is really important because if you're someone who's ever, especially if you've ever struggled with any kind of digestive disorders or uncomfortable symptoms of your digestive system not functioning properly, a lot of people refer to my stomach hurts, but they don't know what actually hurts, and they refer to their entire abdomen as their stomach. And I want to show you guys kind of where things are at and the journey of food when we put something in our body, because it's easier to identify where different problems can happen, and it's easier for you to relate to yourself where you could have some areas for improvement or different things that you may be able to focus on to either relieve your digestive discomfort or help improve your overall health by addressing the different areas. So we're going to have a quick anatomy and physiology lesson, And then we're going to go on into some specifics about multiple sclerosis and research that has come out over the last handful of years specific to gut health and the connections there. And then we're going to end with what you can do. You're going to walk away with some tangible things that you can do today to definitely start improving your digestive health. And Terry, yes, I am recording this so that the recording will go to you guys, and you can record it separately if you like. I upload every recording of every webinar to YouTube. And let me actually make sure, now that you said that, let me make sure that it's recording, because that would be a bummer if it wasn't. Okay, we are. Better be safe than sorry. Okay, let me go back here really quick. Every webinar I've ever done for My Strength Wellness has been uploaded to YouTube, and then it's put on the website as well. Okay, so let me go back to this, and then we will dive in. Okay, are you guys ready for this? So here is our little, I used to have a name. I used to have a huge diagram that I used to take to workshops that I would do in person, and I had a huge board, and I think I drew him out, and I named him Art, because my art skills are horrible. But here is a very simple diagram of where everything is in your digestive system, or the most important parts at least. So we're going to kind of go through when digestion starts. And a lot of people don't think about this, but it actually starts when you smell food. When you smell the aroma of delicious food, what usually happens is you get your salivary glands activate, right? So you get a watery mouth because you're super excited about what you're about to eat. And that is intentional. That's actually the beginning of digestion, because saliva has different chemicals and enzymes in it that helps to start the breakdown of food. And it also obviously aids in lubrication of helping us swallow. So smell is very important. That's why when you're taking your time eating and you stop and you have a moment of grace and you like smell what you're about to eat, hopefully it's delicious, and you chew it really good. This is another mistake that a lot of people make nowadays, is they basically inhale their food. Like my 2-year-old and my husband, both of them have that trait where they like barely chew their food. But chewing has a very important function in starting the breakdown of food. The more you chew your food, the easier you make it on the rest of your digestive system to continue to break down that food so it can be absorbed and utilized. So smell, saliva, chewing is step one. We swallow our food and it goes down the esophagus. There's actually a trapped door at the top of the esophagus and at the bottom. The esophagus ends in the stomach, and you can see the stomach right here, right under the liver. And your stomach is not that large. So when people say my stomach hurts and they're referring to their whole abdomen, you can see your stomach is actually only about this big. It's not that big. In your stomach, there is, as most of you know, stomach acid, because what happens when we get heartburn or acid reflux, we feel it, right? Acid reflux or heartburn happens when that trapped door at the top of the stomach, at the bottom of the esophagus, becomes loosened, and it allows acid or food contents back up into the esophagus. And it burns, because stomach acid is incredibly strong, and it's intended to be that way. And so your food, after you swallow it, goes into your stomach, and it spends about 3 to 4 hours there in this intense hydrochloric acid, where it's broken down into a liquid solution called chyme. Or I might not be saying that right, and that's okay. I believe that's how it's pronounced. But anyways, it's turned into a liquid solution From the stomach, you can kind of follow it here. It goes into the beginning of the small intestine. And step 3 is happening as the stomach is holding the food and breaking it down. It triggers the liver and to start. If you had any kind of fatty food, the liver makes an enzyme or a chemical called bile. Bile is stored in the gallbladder. See how tiny the gallbladder is? I don't know if any of you have ever had your gallbladder removed. I had to have an emergency gallbladder removal, unfortunately. It was right around graduation of college, I think it was. And it was also like 10 days before my wedding. It was a very stressful time. And it's incredible how much pain that little gallbladder can cause. But the gallbladder's function is to hold the bile. So the liver makes bile to help break down fats, and then the liver stores bile in the gallbladder. And when you eat fatty foods of any kind, then the bile or the gallbladder squeezes out the bile, and it starts to mix with the food in the small intestine. And this helps break down the food even further. The pancreas in step 4, pancreas is right back here behind the stomach. The pancreas produces other digestive enzymes to help with the digestion of carbohydrates and proteins. And it's one of the functions of the pancreas. And that also releases those enzymes into the small intestine. And it all comes together in the small intestine to help further completely break down that food. That liquid chyme that comes from the stomach goes into the small intestine. And this is where the magic happens. And this is where a lot of the damage happens, is in the small intestine. I hope I haven't lost you guys quite yet. So the small intestine, to many people's surprise, you can see it's all this. My son was watching me make this PowerPoint, and he goes, "Mom, that looks like macaroni." I'm like, "Yeah, pretty much." It looks like a bunch of spaghetti noodles all crumpled up. The small intestine, if you were to stretch it out, is 22 feet long, approximately. That's crazy, right? All of the enzymes mix in with your food here. And this is where you're going to see on the next slide, we're going to look at a little bit further into the small intestine because it's really fascinating. But this is where all of your nutrition is absorbed, from your food to be used throughout the body. So it has this process. It goes through the small intestine. And then this big tube here is your large intestine or your colon. Food spends approximately 10 to 12 hours here, and the main function that happens in the large intestine is that the water is removed from the unusable food, and then that is turned into feces, which exits the body when we go to the bathroom. So, you guys still with me? That is the basic anatomy physiology of the complete digestive system. Next, I want to look with you a little bit further into the small intestine, because again, this is where a lot of the main digestion happens. It's where all of the absorption happens, but it's also where a lot of problems come up for a lot of people. And this is the most applicable to our health in general. It all plays a part. But when there's damage done in the small intestine, that's when it can trigger inflammatory disorders. That's when it can have an effect on our immune system, so on and so forth. So this part of the small intestine, you can see in this little circle here, has different layers. And I looked for forever to try and find a good picture. And this was this was almost one of the best ones I could find. But if you think of it as a tube that's lined with these like finger-like structures called villi, and those villi in each of the there's so many different little folds throughout the entire tube. They move back and forth and they push food through your digestive system, along with peristalsis, which is the muscle movement of food through the digestive system. And these villi are covered with tiny holes that absorb the nutrients from your food. Because really, when we think about it, what is the purpose of us eating? Survival. The actual purpose at a primal level of us eating food is to get nutrition so that it's carried to all of our systems and organs so that we can be healthy. That's really the goal, even though in our day and age we lose sight of that being the goal, and instead we usually eat for taste more than for survival. But that is really the purpose of eating, is to absorb that nutrition. And that's how and where we absorb our nutrition. The intestinal wall is also richly supplied with blood vessels that carry those absorbed nutrients to the liver through the portal vein. It's incredible how connected everything is. You guys will, I feel like in some of the research that I show you today, you're going to see why they've discovered there's a connection between the brain and the gut called the gut-brain axis. Everything is so intimately connected with our gut. And if you think about it, it makes sense because we say things like, I have butterflies in my stomach when I'm nervous. Mentally, I'm nervous, but I feel it here. Or I feel like I just got punched in the gut when I'm super upset, but we say it about our gut. Isn't that interesting how we say these things, but a lot of times we've never really thought about why we say those things? There's a very intense connection there. There's a connection with hormones and gut health, which is a completely different topic that I could talk about one day. But I just wanted you guys to kind of get a visual and understand where the absorption of nutrition is happening and when the damage happens to these microvilli, such as with celiac disease. With celiac disease, where someone has, in a sense, it's an autoimmune condition of where there's a severe gluten reaction or gluten allergy. And these little microvilli, in a sense, I've heard it explained as they've been steamrolled. And so it's really hard for those people, for those patients to absorb nutrition. And that's why a lot of them can lose a lot of weight and have a hard time putting weight on no matter what they're eating. Anyways, we'll talk about a couple other scenarios where it becomes a problem, but I just wanted you to kind of get a deeper look into that. Okay. So, common areas of digestive disorders, and feel free to comment in the chat if you experience currently or have experienced one of these. Heartburn and reflux, right? It is so common. I'm trying to remember the statistic because I just talked about this. I just did another presentation for a different company on gut health, and it was like 700 million or something crazy Americans struggle with some sort of digestive ailment, but they think that it's normal. I've had several people tell me that they don't go to the bathroom, they don't have a bowel movement for 5 days, but it's normal to them. They think that it's normal, and it's not, to clarify, in case you think that's normal too. So heartburn, acid reflux, if we go back to that diagram, which I will be sending this whole PowerPoint to Lindsay to post on the website. And I also, if you guys aren't yet a part of the Facebook community, I will be sharing the recording and this PowerPoint in there so that you can have it for your records if you want to take a closer look. Heartburn and acid reflux, a lot of times, not all the time, but can be caused due to an acid deficiency. And here is what's so interesting about this. I had shared with you, this was definitely one of the areas that I struggled with when I was young. And the most common thing to do is to get Tums, or you get put on a proton pump inhibitor or medication to decrease stomach acid. And there are many times where that is warranted and that is needed. And it does help temporarily. But in the long run, if one was to stay on those medications, it can actually perpetuate the problem. Here's an example of how to understand that differently. As we age, our production of stomach acid decreases. So per that logic, if heartburn and acid reflux were only because of too much stomach acid, the occurrence of heartburn and acid reflux should decrease as we age, as as our stomach acid decreases. But it actually, the incidence increases, as we all know. It's very common as we age to have more problems with heartburn and acid reflux. And here's what's happening, because you just saw the importance of the full digestive process. If you don't have enough stomach acid, then that food in your stomach, it doesn't fully break down. And then that not fully broken down food putrefies and essentially starts fermenting and can cause gases, which can cause pressure on the stomach. And then it can be passed into the small intestine, not fully digested, where then it continues to rot, in a sense. That's a horrible word, but it's a more basic one. And that continues to produce more gas and bloating, and then it can feed bad bacteria, and it can lead to damage of the small intestine, which we'll talk about. But it increases the pressure on the stomach, on your esophagus, and that's a lot of times what can cause that heartburn or that reflux, because it's so much pressure on that trap door at the bottom that it's allowing food and contents back up because it's so full, because it's not breaking down. Does that make sense? So again, that's not every case, but that is a lot of what I see. That is what I personally experienced. And so we're going to go through, by the end of the night, I'll talk to you about a few natural things you can do to try and improve those symptoms naturally. Okay. So next is constipation. Another area, like, it's not something that people like to talk about openly, is poop, right? But this is a digestive health class, and so we're going to talk about poop. It's important to poop daily. And this was, again, one of my big struggles when I was younger. I mean, when I was in college, late teens, early and mid 20s, this was something I really struggled with, and I didn't know why, because again, I ate the whole grain, everything. I ate so many healthy things, but I still really struggled with bloating and constipation, and it was miserable. And remember that gut-brain axis that I was talking to you about? Constipation can lead to other disorders that are linked to anxiety and depression. And I had debilitating anxiety. And it's been so interesting for me over the last, 15 years almost, how many clients, friends, family members that I've worked with, and they've seen that correlation as well. So we're going to definitely be talking about some remedies with constipation and how to help fix this area, rather than to just take stool softeners, which again, they're needed at some point. Medication for severe constipation absolutely is needed in some cases. But what I want to share with you are some lifelong things that you could do to help get to the root of it. Why is it happening? For a lot of people, it's magnesium deficiency. They're super stressed out. They have an imbalance of bacteria in their gut. Their nutritional diet is doing more harm than good, things like that. And that leads me to the third part, which is a very big word, I know. Dysbiosis. A bacterial overgrowth or bacterial imbalance is more accurate of this word. And bacteria, especially nowadays where everything's antibacterial, I feel like bacteria freaks people out. But in all honesty, it's everywhere. And it's our friend. We actually want to have more beneficial bacteria in our body as much as possible. What the problem and what happens is a lot of people have an overgrowth of the wrong kind of bacteria, of the bad bacteria, if you will. And that can lead to a lot of damage. That can lead to the fourth part, which is leaky gut syndrome. And I know that sounds really weird. Leaky gut, right? That sounds disgusting. It sounds like my gut is a pincushion and there's a bunch of holes and I'm just leaking out, like if you were to put holes in a hose and turn the water on. In a sense, that's kind of what's happening. to that tube of your small intestine. And here's what happens in the problem with leaky gut syndrome. The bacterial overgrowth, the bad bacteria, or the putrefaction of food due to an ineffective or inefficient digestive system, it starts to lead to parasite overgrowth. It starts to lead to these little bugs such as parasites. I know this is so gross to talk about, but it's just the reality of where we're at. Some people do get worms of some kind, and the bad bacteria, they're living things themselves, and they can actually poke holes in our small intestine lining. And when that happens, it allows for the leakage of undigested food and particles to leak out of our small intestine into the abdominal space. And this is what happens when that happens. It triggers our immune system, because our immune system starts saying, hey, there's a foreign invader floating around in the lymph system, in the fluid outside, and it shouldn't be there. There's a foreign invader in our bloodstream. It should not be there. We're going to attack it, right? Because that's what our immune system is created to do. It attacks foreign invaders. Have you guys noticed, I don't know if any of you have done a food allergy or food sensitivity test before, and it, like, over the last 10, 20 years, it has skyrocketed the amount of food sensitivities and food allergies that people have. And this is, I will say, this is a hypothesis or a theory behind why, because so many people have this kind of disorder where their immune system does this sound familiar? Where your immune system is mistakenly attacking something that it shouldn't be. And the problem is in the immune system mistakenly attacking, not in the actual food or the actual organ or the actual system. There's also a lot of research behind this in relation to autoimmune conditions, because it's exactly what happens in an autoimmune condition, as you guys know, where the immune system is mistakenly attacking your body instead of a foreign invader that shouldn't be there. So again, I'm not a specialist in autoimmune conditions. I've spoken about it a lot, but it's just something to be aware of, to maybe look into some more, because it is really fascinating. And the more that we can start to lean into healing our gut, the better off we'll be all around for overall health. Okay. I'm so excited to share these with you. I've got 3 slides and some references here that I'm going to be, I don't think it'll let me. I will be, you'll have access to these links so that you can look at the actual research yourself. But I took some paragraphs from 3 different sources about gut health and multiple sclerosis and what they're finding. So this one was from 2016. This is actually the oldest one I'm using. And it said detailed fecal, this one is also the biggest words, but I want to read it to you. Detailed fecal microbiome analysis revealed that MS patients had distinct microbial community profile, meaning, I'm going to translate as I read this, meaning there was a distinct bacteria in their gut in MS patients compared to healthy controls. Thus, our study is consistent with the hypothesis that MS patients have gut microbial dysbiosis, there's that word again, so bacterial imbalance, and further studies needed to better understand their role in the etiopathogenesis, the cause of MS. Fascinating, right? We're going to keep going. The next one. This one's from 2019. A DNA analysis to identify changes in the gut microbiome. So microbiome, if you don't know, is essentially the world of bacteria in your gut. In people newly diagnosed with MS who have yet to begin using disease-modifying therapies, which I love this because it was before any kind of medication had entered their system for MS, showed that all, regardless of ethnic background, have an abundance of the bacteria group Clostridia compared to people without MS. the study reports. Identifying changes in the gut microbiome, the collection of microorganisms, bacteria, viruses, and fungi present in the gastrointestinal tract that are associated with MS may lead to new diagnostic markers or perhaps identify an environmental root cause of the disease. How fascinating is that, right? I mean, to me, it's so exciting that there's so much research that's happening in the development that potentially around the corner. I'm so excited to talk about this with Lindsay more, because I know that this is kind of where her heart is too, is creating some sort of clinical trial where let's test this out more. Let's dive into this further, because if this is true, that all multiple sclerosis patients have an abundance of this one bacterial group of Clostridia, what happens if we start focusing in on eliminating that and boosting beneficial bacteria? Again, I'm not in any capacity making any claims. I'm not a researcher, but it's really fascinating and exciting to start thinking about. Okay, and the last one. Although the etiology of MS is yet to be known, it appears that regulating the immune system and suppressing inflammatory pathways may possibly have a favorable effect on the healing of this disease. Evidence suggests that probiotics consumption via gut microbiome alteration devises beneficial effects in improving immune and inflammatory response in MS. How freaking cool, right? And if you've been on if you were at all on my talk where I talked about inflammatory foods and non-inflammatory foods, this is kind of something that we've talked about. There is evidence. We know that multiple sclerosis is an inflammatory disease, and we know that there's some foods that promote inflammation and there's some foods that help inhibit inflammation. So there has to be some kind of connection, and all of this is connected to our gut health. Okay, so I loved this diagram because now we're going to get into what you can do. What can you do about it? That's great, Jessica. That's awesome research, but how the heck do I change my gut microbiome? So I'm going to share with you some different things that influence it, because it's more than just taking a probiotic. Unfortunately, I wish it was that easy, believe me, and that will be helpful. But there are different influences that change the health of your gut ecosystem. So number one at the top, we have stress management, right? We know, and again, I'll dive into this a little bit more, but we know that stress affects every area of our health, including our gut health. Mental and emotional health, the two are integrated. There's a lot of people that will go through a traumatic experience, an intense trauma, and their health will never be the same if they haven't gotten really good help, mental, emotional, therapy help and physical support to help their body recover from the trauma. And I know this firsthand from stuff that I've been through. Some of you have heard my story in the very first webinar, but I was in a motorcycle accident when I was 11. My dad and I were hit by a drunk driver. I was on a coma and on life support, had required 5 surgeries to save my leg and my life. My father passed away a few weeks later due to medical malpractice, and that was my first of a couple different traumatic experiences that my body went through. And one of the reasons why I'm so passionate about helping educate people of how everything, mind, body, soul, is so connected, how all of our systems and organs are so connected, is because I tried the piecemealing it together. I tried only addressing, changing my diet. I tried only taking supplements. I tried only doing a piece of it. And I got so frustrated because it didn't work and I didn't feel better until I studied a lot. I did a lot of research for my own health and learned how to fix my own gut health issues, my own hormonal imbalances, my own mental, emotional stuff that I had to process and work through and release. And it all comes down to getting back to that foundation. It's so important for us, to have that foundational approach. So mental, emotional health is really important. And then diet. Obviously, we know nutrition is so important. What we put in our body are the building blocks for our future self. And it's different for every person. Some people have food sensitivities to random things like blueberries and apples because of their gut ecology and potential leaky gut syndrome. And they need to know that because, apples might affect them differently than somebody else. So, as far as nutrition, I would highly recommend you going back to the 2 webinars I did on nutrition. I think they'll be really helpful as a starting place. Sleep and exercise. We know these things are important, and a lot of times we take them for granted. I also fully understand that some of you may be in a place in your multiple sclerosis journey where you can't exercise. Or maybe you used to be able to, do triathlons or do CrossFit workouts, and now it's a miracle if you can get out of bed. And I understand how difficult mentally that could be. We talked about that, I think it was a couple weeks ago, on goal setting with chronic illness and how it's different, but it's still possible to keep making steps, taking steps, and moving forward. So whatever you can do with exercise, and then whatever you can do really to get some good sleep. There is an element of immunity and genetics that definitely is part of the whole gut health picture. It's why, I'm 25 weeks pregnant and I'm downing probiotics and really try to eat as clean as possible because I know that's going to affect my daughter. There are things genetically that are passed on. And then obviously the microbiome, which we've talked about. So I'm going to kind of break these down a little bit more and talk about specifics. And I forgot a water bottle in here. Okay, so microbiome. What are specifics you can do? So obviously probiotics are really powerful. If you think about the words probiotic, pro is for, bio is life. It's pro-life. When you think of the word antibiotic, anti against, bio life. So antibiotics kill bacteria. Probiotics help to re-inoculate the gut with good bacteria. One of the reasons why some people struggle with dysbiosis, that imbalance of good and bad bacteria, is because they've had, for one reason or another, had to have several rounds of antibiotics. Now, don't get me wrong, antibiotics absolutely are there for a reason when you need them. But there are some instances where they've either been overprescribed or taken for viruses where they won't do anything, or for whatever reason, someone's had to be on them for a long period of time for a serious illness. And when you think of an antibiotic, it's like a grenade being dropped in your body, a grenade being dropped in your gut. So yes, it will kill the bad bacteria, but it's also going to kill the good bacteria. And then it's kind of like all the good guys and bad guys are wiped out, and what's going to come back is left with whether or not you're going to have a healthy gut or not. And unfortunately, a lot of times that bad bacteria will reculture really quickly. So adding in probiotics is really helpful. But I'll tell you right now that buying a probiotic at Walmart is probably not going to do anything. Remember that stomach acid that we talked about in that anatomy and physiology lesson? It's super strong. There's specific strains of probiotics that have been proven to survive the stomach acid and others that cannot. And if it doesn't survive the stomach acid, it won't get to the small intestine. The small intestine is actually where it's needed to do the repair. Probiotics actually can essentially, for a visual, patch up walls in your small intestine where there's been damage done. Probiotics essentially can help kill bad bacteria. It's like in a war. If you think of your gut as a war, as a battlefield, you want as many good guys as possible to beat up the bad guys. That's the ideal scenario, right? The ideal scenario isn't necessarily a bomb being dropped on everybody. Sometimes it's necessary. But the ideal scenario is to get super strong troops of good guys coming in and taking over the place and doing their good work. right? So here are a couple strains from the studies that I linked in that we just talked about, that they noticed that these had a specific beneficial effect on the gut microbiome, especially in relation to inflammation in the body. I know their names they're all Latin. They're all crazy. But if you read the back of a probiotic bottle, it'll tell you what strains are in there. And there's so many. So you can do some more research and look up, different people who've had autoimmune conditions or who have had multiple sclerosis and what's worked for them. But these are specific strains that I know of that are good. Advanced Naturals is a good brand that I know of. Most of Garden of Life's probiotics are pretty good. You can't go wrong, for the most part, with cultured foods and drinks. So things like homemade or fresh sauerkraut. Now, I'm not talking about canned, processed on the shelf sauerkraut. That's nasty, and that's not going to do you any good. But nowadays, especially for you guys in Southern California, you can find at most likely any grocery store, for sure at a health food store, raw sauerkraut. And most of them are amazing. One of my favorite websites and resources for gut health is called bodyecology.com. The book's amazing. Donna Gates is the owner of the company. I really love her and all of her research and what she's done to help so many people heal their gut health. She has specific starter bacteria to make your own sauerkraut or make your own kefir, which I love. I personally recommend for someone who has an autoimmune condition, or when I have clients who have cancer or who are really sick, because what happens is you're specifically cultivating and growing, because that's what you're doing when you're fermenting something, is you're growing bacteria. You're breaking down the food and you're growing a bacteria, and you want it to be beneficial, for sure, a beneficial strain. And so that's why I like specific sauerkrauts or kefirs that are started with that specific culture. And again, it's called bodyecology.com if you want to check it out. But if you were to go to the store, refrigerated sauerkraut, kombucha, kefir. One of my favorite kefirs is a brand called Inner Eco, and it's a liquid probiotic. I give it to my kids. I've given it to them since they were infants, and it's fermented coconut water. And coconut water has a ton of minerals, but when it's fermented, all the sugar is taken out because bacteria eats sugar. And so all that's left is this bubbly, it's not, it doesn't taste horrible, but it's not going to be sweet like coconut water. It's just a bubbly probiotic that's full of minerals and full of powerful probiotics. So I really like that brand. And then miso and kimchi are also fermented foods. So those are a few. As far as nutrition, if you're really wanting to get serious about healing your gut, I'm not going to lie to you, it's not an easy dietary approach. And I know this from experience. But essentially what you're trying to do is you're trying to starve the bad bacteria, which means eliminating any sugars or yeasts or moldy, like foods that are known to carry mold, like peanuts. And you're trying to get a lot of nutrient density, a lot of probiotic foods in. That's essentially what the approach is. And so even fruit, like when you're really serious about it, and you can read about this more on Body Ecology website, but you have to remove high sugar fruits. So the only ones you're left with are like Granny Smith apples and berries and grapefruits in moderation. Definitely removing gluten, because that has been known to cause gut health problems and damage because of the yeast and how much the molecule of gluten has been hybridized over the last 100 years, so much so that the chromosomes are completely different, and it's very different than Bible time wheat than what we have today, and it's very hard for most people to break down. So those are just some recommendations. You can ask me more questions if you want to know further recommendations, but usually that's what that looks like. Sleep obviously is important. Aim for 7 to 9 hours of uninterrupted sleep per night if you can. Try to have a bedtime routine where you're shutting down screen time. Try not to sleep with your phone next to you. That's also really important because it's constantly stressing your brain. We know that these things have electrical frequencies that come off of them. And when it's constantly next to you when you're sleeping, it's constantly having those frequencies that are coming off and stressing you out when you're sleeping passively. And then the last one, last slide here, stress. We all know it's not good for us, right? We're in a really stressful situation right now, are we not? So we can't always avoid stress, but just like we went through, there's a stress management webinar that you can refer to that's on the website where I went over my best stress management techniques. We know stress weakens the body. It impairs the immune system, slows the digestion down, and that can lead to the overgrowth of parasites and viruses, bad bacteria, and it also, since it slows down the metabolic system, it can lead to constipation, which can cause further problems. So do the best you can to find the joy, as hard as it is. I know it's so hard some days, but do the best you can to find some positive stress management techniques that work for you. And then some specific constipation fixes, in addition to everything that we talked about, because all of that will help. Of course, if it's safe to do so and approved by your provider, enemas have been helpful for people. Colonics, colon hydrotherapy, I actually have had that done before, and it was really helpful for me. Magnesium is a huge one. The vast majority, I will say this, I've never worked with a client who struggled with constipation and magnesium deficiency wasn't on the table as one of the reasons why. Magnesium is really important for our smooth muscle function, and that's why 2 of the top symptoms of magnesium deficiency is actually heart palpitations because of the smooth muscle in our heart, and constipation because that peristalsis, that wave-like muscle movement that moves food through your digestive system, needs magnesium. And when you're deficient, those can be 2 symptoms that a lot of people have. So I recommend a magnesium. Even Epsom salt baths is one way to get magnesium in your body. Magnesium oil, magnesium spray. Definitely, obviously, with all of these things, you can talk to your provider to make sure it won't interfere with anything that you're doing. There's liquid, like an angstrom or colloidal magnesium, that won't upset the digestive system quite as much as some of the powder supplements. We drink in our household Calm Tea. Peter Gilham's, I think is the brand. Calm Tea. You can find it honestly at most drugstores nowadays. Definitely on Amazon. Definitely at a health food store. And it's a powdered tea. I drink it at night. Fiber, we all know, is important. Adequate hydration is super important. If you're dehydrated, that's going to lead to several problems all along the digestive system process. And then the liver, a lot of people's livers are really congested. And so looking into some liver supporting herbs or doing a liver detox, again, always check with your provider to make sure that this is okay and safe for you to do, because there are some that are not. Those are all things that will help support digestion and relieve constipation. And then lastly, for those of you who do struggle with acid reflux or heartburn, here are some things that you can try. So apple cider vinegar daily in water. I used to drink apple cider vinegar in warm water with every single meal. And still to this day, I like to put it in my water. I personally add stevia, and it almost tastes like a lemonade, like an apple lemonade. And it's good for pH balance, and it's really helpful for the digestive system. I'm not an advocate of doing apple cider vinegar shots personally, because that can burn your esophagus, and I have done that before, and it literally, I had a spasm of my, oh my gosh, basically my throat spasmed and I couldn't breathe for a second. So I personally always recommend diluting it. but it is really helpful for a lot of people to drink to help restore that stomach acid. Um, Across the board for all health purposes, I recommend switching out iodized salt with Himalayan salt. Himalayan salt has actually been shown to help restore stomach acid naturally. Eating in low stress environments. This is really important. How many people eat standing up, eat while on the go, eat while watching TV, eat while doing other things? And there's different research that's shown how important it is to have your emotions around you be calming while you're enjoying your food, and really focus on enjoying your meal. The gratitude of the nutrition, like maybe it sounds a little hippy dippy for you, but it's true. Like being grateful for the nutrition that's going into your body and slowing down that process really does help. And then some of the triggering foods that can actually really relax what's called that lower trapped door. It's the lower esophageal sphincter, is that can, and when that's relaxed, it can cause acid reflux. And chocolate, spicy foods, coffee, alcohol, sugar, and onions are some of the biggest triggers that can cause that acid reflux problem. I used to have it no matter what I ate. And I remember frozen yogurt was one of the hugest triggers for me, which was so sad because in college, that was the coolest thing to do. And it would create so much mucus and so much bloating. And I knew I shouldn't eat it because of how I felt after. But for me, it was restoring that. What helped for me personally was restoring that acid balance, and balancing out my hormones, lowering my stress levels. Because when your stomach acid is balanced and you're able to have that first area of digestion be efficient, it's going to help the rest of your small intestine as well. But if the problem starts there, then it can put, especially chronically over a long period of time, put more stress on the rest of your digestive system. Okay, let me go to the questions. I saw there was a few in the chat box. I want to make sure that I answered you. Okay, Lisa, let's see. Chronic heartburn on a daily basis. It's better without coffee. Okay, so this is, I actually did a, let me stop the share here. I actually did a, I did like a research project on coffee and the digestive system, because there's a lot of conflicting information out there. And I personally noticed after my pregnancies, when I would drink coffee, it would give me really bad bloating and gas. And it just, I was like, mentally, I need it because my kid's not sleeping, but I know that it's affecting me. And it was really interesting. Off the top of my head, I won't remember everything, but it had to do not only, so coffee is definitely a trigger for heartburn, for sure. So I would try to start eliminating it for a period of time and replace it with something else so that you still have that crave. It is something that we become addicted to and we crave, but it changes the pH too of your digestive system, and that can cause other breakdown digestive problems in the small intestine, which is why for some people it will cause diarrhea. For some people it will cause extreme gas and like sour gas, things like that. So one of my favorite coffee substitutes to this day, I want to say they're from Southern California, but it's called Dandy Blend, and it's made with dandelion, and it tastes delicious, and it's dissolvable, especially now that it's getting warmer. It's really easy to dissolve in hot water or to dissolve as like an iced coffee drink. So I used to get the So Delicious coconut creamer, and I used to do Dandy Blend and ice and water and coconut creamer and some vanilla stevia, and it was like an iced vanilla latte. Dandelion is very, very good for your liver. And so it's actually beneficial for the digestive system. and you have a coffee substitute. So it's winning all around, but I would definitely look into maybe switching over, because I think in the long run, this could heal and then you can have your coffee again. But if you're having heartburn symptoms every day, then I would definitely do something about it, so that you don't want to struggle with that, and it will just continue to get worse. If you need to have bread, is sourdough an okay substitute? So here's the reality of sourdough. If you know someone who is using an organic flour and they're doing a proper sourdough fermentation can actually change the gluten molecules to where people with gluten sensitivity can actually eat it and not have any problems. But if you're somebody who has more of an immune gluten reaction, then it's still going to be a problem. The same with sprouted bread. I would tend to choose sprouted bread over sourdough personally. I think that it's usually more nutritious. The problem is the hybridized wheat that is everywhere nowadays. If you can find an ancient grain bread, that's usually more helpful, or just try and do a gluten-free bread and see how that goes. And a good liver detox, again, it depends on each person and their state of health, because if you're someone who is struggling with chronic constipation, you actually don't want to do a liver detox first. You would want to do a colon detox first, because if your liver is detoxifying and you're not eliminating those toxins, it can actually be more harmful to you. They will recirculate through your system and it's make you feel really sick. And that's why not everyone is ready for a detox. A lot of people need to get their body stronger or make sure they're having regular bowel movements first. Advanced Naturals is a good company. I've used they have, I think, a bunch. They have a colon, a liver, and a parasite cleanse that I've done before. Yeah, but that's probably my biggest tip. Okay, I'm so glad that you asked this, Terry. So my gastro guy stated lazy colon, what to do to help make a less lazy colon. So I'm glad you asked that, because a lot of people, and I did this when I was in college, because I struggled with constipation so bad that I would take stimulating herbs like smooth move tea or senna. There's a lot of herbs out there that market that they'll help with constipation. But what happens is when you overstimulate the colon over time, it basically says, screw you, I don't need to work, you're doing it for me, so I'm not going to work until you tell me to. And that's where the term lazy colon came from, when we use too many, even medications that stimulate a bowel movement that can create that lazy colon. And so how to make it less lazy, it's doing the other things. So when I'm working with a client, I would kind of do a health history and see where we can identify why they were struggling with constipation in the first place. And many times we can identify you have not been hydrating sufficiently. For most people, you should be drinking half of your body weight in ounces of water, fresh water each day. And a lot of people aren't doing that. For other people, their hydrochloric acid was really low. So we try to boost that, and that helps with constipation as well. Or they're not getting nearly enough fiber or fresh fruits and vegetables. So those things can all help support a functional colon without like forcing it to work. And little by little, it will strengthen. Okay, I take this probiotic. Helps with my husband. We have been taking it for 2 years now. Bio C4. I feel like I have. So the question was, sorry, I take Bio. I think it's Bio C4 you meant to say. I take Bio C4 probiotic, which has one of the 4 ingredients you mentioned, but it helps me and my husband. We've been taking it for 2 years now. That's fantastic. I personally, off the top of my head, I have not. I feel like I've Bio X4. Okay. I don't recall ingredients, but if it's helping you, that's fantastic. That's amazing. And everyone kind of, that's the hard part with natural health. That's the hard part with supplements, right? Is that we're bombarded. There's so many brands out there. There's so many claims out there. I feel like we've all been oversold to and underdelivered to. So if you guys ever have a question about a product, I highly recommend you being a part of the My Wellness Community group on Facebook, because I'm in there and you can always tag me and ask me questions, or put pictures of your supplements, or ask me to read a label on something. And I'd be more than happy to give you my feedback. But if it's helping you guys, that's fantastic. That's wonderful. Can I check magnesium from my blood tests? So you can, definitely. Magnesium is one of the markers that they can check on a blood test. I would also go off of your symptoms, if that makes sense. It is very hard to overdose on magnesium when you're taking responsible recommended dosages from a supplement. I will say that it is the first mineral to be depleted when you're stressed, and everybody's stressed right now. And so it's something that, for so many reasons, it helps with so many different cellular functions in the body, that a lot of people are deficient, and it is very hard for it to actually hurt you. I don't even know how it can. The worst thing that will happen if you take too much magnesium is that with most supplements, you'll get diarrhea. It will cause, because it has to do with the smooth muscle, and it will basically give you diarrhea. And so then you've taken too much. And that's what I like about the liquid form of magnesium, is a lot of them, the molecules are so small that they will not stimulate or affect the digestive system in a negative way. Any other questions, you guys? Feel free to put them in the chat box or unmute yourself. Otherwise, I will let you go. Okay, Neuro stated here as well, MS gives this kind of digestive issue, but now the Clostridia elimination would be the goal by thinning it out by adding more. Yeah, so I mean, again, this is not my specialty, but just from what the medical journals and the research is showing, that is the idea, is what if we tried? And that's kind of where, that's the cool part about this, is that if you took the approach of trying to starve out the Clostridia strain of bacteria and wipe it out and flood your system with beneficial bacteria, I have never, ever heard of any negative side effects of that happening. Only good can come from that, as far as everything that I've ever experienced or everything that I've ever read. And just from just looking at it objectively, beneficial bacteria is always good, and removing harmful bacteria is always good. And so if you were to do that through those things that I talked about, again, check out the Body Ecology website. There's some good research on there. But there's not, it's like such a win-win scenario in a sense. I don't ever see anyone getting worse from adding beneficial bacteria to their body and eliminating potentially harmful or negative bacteria that has been shown in research to be in every MS patient. Again, I hope I'm not communicating outside of my scope here. I'm not making any claims by any means, but I think it's just fascinating to read about and to look into. And I just wanted to share that with you, and absolutely bring it to your providers and your practitioners that you work with. And I will, again, link all of these in the YouTube. When I upload it, I'll put it in the paragraph in the description. I'll link the studies that you can take to your provider if you'd like, or you can look into yourself. They're extremely detailed. And then I'll put it in our Facebook page as well.
Jessica, I have one question.
Yeah, absolutely.
As far as the bread, because my wife likes to eat bread, specifically white bread, but I but I try to get the bread that has the uh, multi-grain or wheat that has no artificial preservatives, colors, or flavors, and no high fructose corn syrup. Is that decent to eat compared to any other breads?
That's absolutely much better. So I feel like there's levels. There's definitely levels. Um, for high fructose corn syrup is one of those that's extremely inflammatory. So avoiding that is fantastic. You've done great. Getting more whole grains is definitely better than the white flour. When it comes to it just depends on people's health goals, to be honest with you, because if it comes to someone really wanting to reset their gut health, that that individual would probably need to eliminate the bread for right now. And it doesn't mean it's forever, but for right now it would be good. And if someone, that's like their kryptonite and they're like, I can't live without bread, then I would go to a sprouted bread or a gluten-free bread. Usually they're in the frozen section, and they're not the same. I will tell you right now, they're not the same as someone who's been gluten-free for years and years. But the health benefits, it's kind of one of those things where you weigh the health benefits versus the temporary satisfaction of a sandwich, which I'm pregnant, so my hormones and my cravings, I get it. But I kind of go back to that for myself too. Hopefully that was helpful. Any other
Thank you.
questions? Yeah, absolutely. Any other questions, you guys? Cool. Well, thank you so much for being on. Thank you for your questions. I love chatting with you. Next week is going to be another cooking show, another cooking class. We're going to be talking about snacks. So, healthy snacks that are my husband and children approved, not just the health nut over here, and things that you can make at home, especially while in quarantine. And if you guys ever have any questions for me, my contact info is in the recording after every single one of these. You can reach out to Lindsay and she can give it to you. And I'm in the Facebook group. So thank you guys again. I hope that you have a wonderful night. I hope everyone's staying healthy and safe out there. Bye.